You ever have those days where you wake up, you feel anxious, stressed, depressed, mental fog, or just overstimulated, or you feel like you just want to be alone, you don't want to interact with anyone, and you just can't figure out why? Well, sometimes instead of looking for complex answers, the solution could be all around you. Right now, I'm recording here in Mongolia. I'm up in the mountains. It's very cold. There's a lot of ice around me, so I'm covering my neck, and it's high altitude. So you might hear me taking deep breaths while making the video. But it reminded me of an experience I had about 25 years ago working for the VA hospital, Veterans Affairs. And I used to have over 100 patients there that were under my care. They had depression, anxiety, stress, bipolar, PTSD. They were soldiers. They were veterans from like the Korean War, World War II, Vietnam, the Gulf War, everything. And it was interesting interacting with them because I was an intern. I was just out of school and I learned so much. It was an amazing experience. And I got to know a lot of the guys who were there on a really personal level because I was with them every day. We worked out and we did what's called horticulture therapy. I was working as an occupational therapist. We used to grow fruits, vegetables, flowers, and during the day we would just talk about everything that was on everyone's mind. And at one point we went on a field trip, and that was great. You know, we took maybe half of the patients because half of them, they had more severe symptoms, and it was difficult with us in terms of staffing to have people that can watch over them safely so they wouldn't be in danger. Some of them needed one-on-one care. But for about half of them, we loaded up the vans, we got camping gear. It was myself and several other medical professionals, and we started driving up to the mountains. In fact, it was Sequoia, California, one of my favorite places. And I had a really cool guy in my van with me who was a patient. And my van was full of all the food, supplies, water, tents, all that kind of stuff. And we were talking up a storm. I really enjoyed this guy's company. We were talking about girls, sports, and pretty much everything I could think of. And I remember we would stop at the gas station and he'd ask me, can I go to the bathroom? Can I buy a soda? Can I buy a chip? He would ask me constantly. I go, yeah, go ahead. And I know part of it is because, you know, I'm the medical person in charge, and also because he's from the military. And I think a lot of them will view me as kind of their CO, you know, the commanding officer, even though I wasn't in the military directly. So, you know, they showed their respect, and he was obviously very respectful. And at one point he asked me, can I buy some Dramamine for the motion sickness? He said, I'm getting car sick. And again, I was just out of school and I didn't really think much of it because the guy was just like anybody else. A lot of these people, you couldn't really tell that they had any difficulties or challenges. They were just like myself or anybody. And I said, yeah, sure. And then we started driving, and maybe a half hour later, I saw him getting really jittery. He started talking to himself. He kept unbuckling and buckling his seatbelt. And I said, what's going on? He says, I'm going to jump out of the van. I was going on the freeway, you know, really fast, like 65 miles per hour. I said, no. I grabbed him. I held him and I pulled over. And luckily there was a rest stop like immediately. I just pulled over, and luckily I had lots of supplies. I just started drowning him in water. You know, I told him, drink this water. I think he drank like 2 gallons of water. He just kept drinking. I was trying to flush the medication out of his body. And apparently the medication had an interaction with some of the meds that he was taking, and it destabilized him mentally. He started hearing voices. He started telling me that the voices were telling him to jump out of the car in the freeway. And he started explaining to me that he had done it before in the past. He said he was with his mom, and at one point the voices were calling him a pussy. And they told him, if you don't jump out of the van, you know, you're a wuss. So he jumped out of his mom's car, not the van. And he rolled on the freeway, and he rolled under a semi-truck. And I thought, oh gosh. And because of the high clearance, he said it didn't kill him. But he came out the other side, and he said he got on his knees, he was covered in blood, and he raised his hands up to the sky, and he just started laughing hysterically as all the cars were crashing and swirling all around him. And I was just imagining the scene. I thought, wow, that's really intense. He said they took him to the mental hospital, and they kept him in there for a while till they got him stabilized again. And it made me realize how delicate sometimes someone's mental health can be. Now remember, all of us are the same. We all have depression, stress, anxiety. It's a defense mechanism. So when someone says, oh no, I'm good, I never get depressed, that's not true. There's different levels. You know, like I function fine, I don't have any problems, I don't have any issues with mental health, but it's normal part of life. You know, someone crashes your car, you're like, oh man, you know, you might get upset, you might get a little bummed out, depressed, but you get over it. And I just say, all right, whatever. That's why I have a used car, a salvage car. I'm fine. Maybe like you break up with someone, that's a real downer. That can make you anxious, stressed, depressed. So everybody expresses and feels these emotions. It's part of being a human. It's what helps you kind of gauge yourself in society, kind of manage yourself. Those processes help you kind of stabilize your mind and deal with mental or psychological traumas that might arise, things that are stressful in our environment. And what I noticed with these patients when we finally got up to the camp, the first day they were like, how I always know them, stressed, hearing voices or whatever was going on, depressed. But after about a day, we were up to about 5 days, I saw a very dramatic change. I saw people reconnecting with nature. I saw people walking around, smiling, laughing, talking, like doing things they normally don't do, joking, and just being like regular people, humans. They were just having a good time. And I started realizing, like, when you're in the city, I live in Los Angeles. It's a wonderful city. I love it. I wouldn't live anywhere else. Maybe Paris or Mexico City, but it's a wonderful place. There's all these beautiful things. We have the mountains, there's Mexico, the beaches, the deserts, Disneyland, Hollywood, you name it. There's always a plethora of things to do. Just amazing. And all day you're meeting fascinating people, you're talking to patients, you're just making decisions, you're thinking all day. There's all this stimulation and it's great, but remember, we're humans. And what happens is we get overstimulated, and that's normal. All humans do. You're like a battery. You reach your limit. And there's those days where I come home or I get off work, I've been working at the hospital, and they invite me to a party or a dinner. I say, no, I think I'm gonna stay home. And they say, are you tired? I'm like, no, not really. I'm not tired. I just feel overstimulated. And I hear that a lot from people. They say, no, I don't want to go out. I just want to stay home. I don't want to do this. When you're interacting all day in this very stimulatory environment, you're making a lot of decisions. And every time you make decisions, you build up proteins in your brain. They're called glutamates. And these glutamates, they build up and they kind of cause fogginess in your brain. Now, this is all scientifically proven. That's just how we work. That's why they say we have about 10 good decisions we can make a day, and it's best to make them in the morning. That's when your brain is clear. But after a day of seeing, sometimes hundreds of patients and living this environment, I'm at my max. I just need to decompress. So oftentimes I'll go to the park. I have a nature park by my house. It's called Vista Hermosa in downtown Los Angeles. I'll walk around barefooted in the dark, and I'll just kind of think and decompress. And I just feel, and I learned this from these residents, these patients, when I was in the mountains. All of them just got really chilled out. I didn't recognize them by the second, third, fourth, fifth day. When we came back, they were like different people. So amazing. And I started researching the topic, and I found that, this is actually a common practice. In Japan, when people have depression, anxiety, stress, they prescribe nature walks every day. Sometimes they'll even take you to like hospitals, like mental hospitals or something. And part of your treatment and your therapy is to go for walks every day for an hour, 2 hours, whatever your physical ability allows. Nature. In Germany, they do the same thing under medical prescription. In some cases, they even do it nude so that you get sunlight on your body. And I started analyzing all this and trying to figure out, what's the message here? The message is that it's part of my biology, all of us. Sure, we have our fancy lives. I live in a big city. I drive a car. I fly in planes. I eat, processed food or whatever. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I'm still an animal. I'm part of nature. I'm part of all of this, and so are you. You're part of it. We're part of all this nature, and when we remove ourselves too much or completely, we start seeing dysfunction. That's what I've learned. If you think about it, humans, I've been around for 50 years, but we've been around for millions of years. Homo sapiens in our current form didn't always exist. We're Homo habilis, Homo erectus. There were all types of different people that evolved into what we are today, humans. And we have hardwiring in our neurological system. We have a lot of primitive reflexes and functions that we have used over the last millions of years to function and to be able to survive. And those things kick in, okay? For example, over the millions of years, we lived outdoors. We slept on the dirt. We drank out of rivers. We bathed in rivers. We experienced famine. We drank water. We hunted, all these things where you're interconnected. And if you're not interconnected with nature, you don't survive. You can't, because you won't understand it. You're apart from it. And now, with all these modern conveniences, we're getting more and more separated from it. As I look at big cities, for example, like LA or New York, the more concrete stuff we build, it's like we're like an island in the nature. We don't have as much nature in the city. So we get more and more disconnected, and we're in this highly stimulatory environment. Stimulating your brain. Look at the news. look at TV, look at your phone, all these modern conveniences. But when you think about it, you can't escape nature. It's all around there. I'm filming you on my iPhone. It's made out of rare earth metals that are found all around. The electricity in my house is transmitted through copper wire. My clothing is made out of cotton and different fibers that come from nature. We can't exist, humans, without nature. We need the sun for vitamins to grow food, to eat. We need the stars to navigate, to figure out weather patterns so we can grow our food. We're completely dependent, but at the same time, we're independent. We're separating ourselves from it. Not necessarily consciously, subconsciously. A lot of places I see, like in the cities, are barren. You're in such a hurry, you're so busy, you don't have time to stop and just listen to the water flow or watch the birds. Right here, I'm watching beautiful birds. And all these natural things, they trigger a response in your brain. It's a calming effect. It reconnects you and it focuses you. When you're always under high stimulation and you don't take time to decompress with nature, it causes dysfunction, mental and physical. And that's what I see a lot of times with patients. And when I tell them, hey, go for a walk every day, I go, Doc, I feel great. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. These real simple things. A lot of times the simplest things have the most profound effects on us, especially when it comes to mental health. So when you're thinking about your depression, your anxiety, your bipolar, your personality disorder, all these different things, as part of your treatment protocol, you remember mental health affects physical health and physical health and mental health. Go out for a walk, go for a swim, go out in the lakes. If you have limited mobility, go sit in a wheelchair or in a chair outside. Just look at the birds, look at the trees, go to a park, take your shoes off, walk in the sand on the beach. And it makes me think, in LA, people pay a premium to live by the beach or in the mountains or in the Hollywood Hills. And when you really think about it, it's intuitive, it's hardwired. It's like, why do you want to live by the beach? I ask patients. Why do you pay like 3 times the rent or 5 times, the amount to buy a house? Well, I want to look at the sunrise. I want to look at the beach. But why? Why? Because it's stabilizing. It's part of our biology. It's been developed over millions of years. And a lot of times we're not even conscious of it, but it actually creates better balance and physical and mental health when you reconnect. That's why people pay extra to go live amongst the trees or by the beach or walk on the sand every day, because of the effects it has on your health, even though we may not always be aware of it. The good thing is that nature's all around us. So you don't need a lot of money to reconnect. You just have to go outside and spend time alone. I'm here in Mongolia, I'm walking around, I feel amazing. The people here are nomads. So they didn't build up castles and, museums and all this kind of stuff you see in other places, which I also enjoy. The thing here is just the simplicity, the nature. Just hiking around, seeing all these things, thinking about things, just kind of decompressing, reconnecting with nature. So whenever you get a chance, go for a walk, go out in your yard, go hug a tree. If you can, bring some plants into your room. All these things will help stabilize you and clear your energy. You say, well, what energy, Doc? What are you talking about? When you talk about when you see people and they all of us transmit energy. It's part of the law of physics. Remember, energy is not created nor destroyed. Energy transmits. Humans walk in the rooms, you give off energy, good or bad. You might interact with people, you might like them, you might not. But one way or the other, you're interacting with them. You're ingesting all this energy. So by going out in nature, you can decompress, you can relax your mind. So if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And from Mongolia, this is Dr. Ernesto. Thank you and goodbye.